welcome to the Gig Boss Podcast, where musicians go to learn how to navigate the new music economy. I'm your host, Adam Meckler, and on this show, we interview people that have experience in the industry, and we talk a little bit about my own life and all the various different things that I've experienced as a professional musician. Today, we're going to give you 3 tools, all right? We're going to talk about 3 tools for booking gigs, all right? So if you're just getting started, these are great tools for people just getting started. If you've been in the game a little while but you're struggling to book gigs, I still struggle booking gigs. It's crazy. I've been in the game a long time and I still struggle booking gigs. I'm going to give you the 3 tools that I use for booking gigs now today myself, and that's it. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars. Give us a little review. If you're digging the podcast, a little review really helps. And then also, if you're watching on YouTube, then hit like and hit subscribe, and that helps too. We're able to monetize the YouTube content, which really helps us kind of keep this thing going. And we're trying to build. We're trying to grow. Just like you. That's what it's all about. I'm trying to help you grow your career as an independent musician. It is not an enviable position to be in. It's tough. It's tough out there. But you're going to hear from a lot of like-minded individuals on this podcast, myself included. Let's get started. So, number 1, the first tool for booking gigs is to enlist friends or contacts or friends of friends or anybody you know that's already in the music industry. So, a lot of people have come to me asking how to book gigs, how to get started, if I could connect them to somebody that I know. And that's a great place to start, right? So if you know me, you can certainly send me an email, but reach out to somebody in your scene, anybody that you know. This is how I got started. So when I first moved to Minneapolis, I actually got started booking gigs much earlier. I was booking gigs in college. I was like the go-to gig booking guy. I had like a 12-piece salsa band, and I did all the kind of like management for the band. I dealt with the finances, and I dealt with booking the gigs, and then I had somebody else who was the music director for the group, and then I played trumpet in the group. But I got started back then, and I'll tell you a little bit about that at some point. But when I got to Minneapolis, I think one of the most potent memories for me was I was going out to shows a lot, and I was meeting people all the time. I wasn't playing as many gigs because I had just moved to town, but I knew it was important to be on the scene, all right? So that's kind of like that's kind of like A underneath number 1 is to be on the scene, and that's how you meet people. And I met a bunch of people in the scene that I admired, bands that I liked to listen to, and one person in particular, Zach Harris. He had a band called Atlantis Quartet, and I would go see Atlantis Quartet a lot. And I ended up asking a few members of that band to be in my band. I was writing a bunch of music. I had a bunch of music for quintet that was going to feature tenor saxophone and guitar and drums and bass, and I knew that these were like-minded people because I was going to their shows and I was listening to their music, and I knew that I was into similar music as them. And so that really helped kind of bridge the gap. And I would hang late after shows and just talk to them a little bit and introduce myself, tell them what I was doing. And one person in the band, Zach Harris, the guitar player, right away he was like, "Hey man, I'd play with you. What's up? What are you doing?" So he was ready to jump on right away. And so I formed the band, and then I asked those people in my band, I said, "Hey, how do I book a gig? Where do we play? What do we do?" I just moved to town, so I knew some people. I'd been on the scene. I knew some venues, but I didn't really know anybody yet, and nobody really trusted me as a band leader because there's a certain amount of trust that goes into being a band leader, to booking gigs, booking your own groups. You build trust with venues that A, you're going to put on a great show, and B, you're going to promote the show and bring people out to the show, which can be difficult at times, especially if you play music that is sort of like non-standard, non-popular, instrumental based perhaps, which is a lot of the world that I've lived in. I've done a lot of different stuff, but a lot of the world that I've lived in has been sort of like on the instrumental side, which can be hit or miss trying to get people out to the shows. But I asked Zach, I said, "Where should we play?" And he said, "Hey, I know this guy Dan over at the Dakota Jazz Club, the Dakota Club, which is a really amazing club in Minneapolis. And my band's first gig was at the Dakota because I went there. I physically went there. And this is kind of going to bleed into number 2 a little bit. is that you really have to have something that you can give the venue once you do have their ear, once you do have access to the venue or the booking agent at the venue. That could be like an EPK, an electronic press kit that you email to the venue owner, or to the booking person at the venue, which in some cases is the venue owner, which is always weird, but a lot of cases that's somebody else. That's somebody who works downstairs, who's always around, who's maybe at the bar, which is part of why having boots on the ground is really important. But when I got there, I brought them. I had a CD that I had recorded with my quintet. And it was previous stuff that I brought them initially because I hadn't recorded anything with this band yet. So I brought in CDs that I recorded when I was in Appleton going to school at Lawrence University. We recorded these demos. And this is partly what I was saying about jumping back in time. When we were in college, we put a little recorder in the middle of the room, a little like Zoom recorder, and we all just stood. We didn't like plug anything in. It was like we just stood in front of the mics and recorded a demo with my wife singing and my buddy Evan playing guitar and myself playing trumpet. It was a little trio thing. And we brought that thing around to tons of venues and we just handed out. And at that time, it's like CD players were a lot more common. People were still buying CDs. It was like 2008. 2006. And so, we would bring that CD around. People would put it on. Some venues put it on right when we were standing there. And they were like, oh, hey, this is nice. I like this. I'll have you guys play, right? And some people would take it and say, I'll let you know. And then we'd have to do some follow-up. But in this case, I brought one of those demos, something that was more instrumental. That was my music. I had recorded some stuff, I think, for a competition, International Trumpet Guild competition. Is that right? The National Trumpet Competition, which is the jazz division. I was a semifinalist for that. This was probably, I recorded that probably like late time at Lawrence, and I used that demo. I brought that to the Dakota, and I was like, hey, here's my demo, and he goes, who's in your band? So this was the thing that he wanted to know, like, is there anybody that can play in your band? Because he didn't know if I could play or not, and it's, I guess, debatable of whether or not I could at that time. But I said, oh, I've got Zach Harris in my band, I've got Greg Schutte in my band, I've got Adam Linz in my band, and these were all kind of like staple jazz players in the Twin Cities at the time, and still. Greg Schutte actually tours with like Mickey Hart's band from the Grateful Dead, and Ryan. Oh man, I'm gonna forget his name, but he tours with a couple big country artists. Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember. And a lot, like all these musicians play with tons of amazing people, and so when you start to, it's part of like getting to know people and being on the scene and like meeting people, hanging out after shows, like their networks become your networks, right? And that's essentially what we're seeing here, is that Zach's network became my network. Zach was actually the one who told me to get Greg Schutte to play drums. He's like, hey, Greg doesn't really play a whole lot of jazz anymore, and he's an amazing player. It's like, you should get Greg. And so I got Greg to play drums, and I was able to communicate that to the guy at the venue, and he goes, oh, cool. Yeah, it sounds like a good band. We have this late night series where you play after the headliner. You play late, like 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Would you be interested in doing something like that? And I was like, heck yeah, right? So I did that. And surrounding, like we're talking about booking gigs. And so I don't need to get too deep into like promoting your gig yet. And that could probably be another episode. That will definitely be another episode. But I had to get people at the show. I had to get people to the show. In order to get asked to come back, I had to get people to that show. And it's late, right? So, but I was young. I had a lot of young friends, and I was meeting people in town. And I was always pretty active on social media, and I had an email list that I had been building up for a long time. A lot of those fans were my wife's fans, Jana Nyberg fans, and we went really, really hard with Jana's band from about 2006 until we moved to Minneapolis. And then we continued, obviously, to go hard, but we stopped touring quite as much. And I was booking all those tours as well. But he heard the members of the band. He said, yes, let's do it. We booked this on this late night thing, and we packed the place. We got a whole bunch of people in there to see the show. And that was the beginning of my relationship with the Dakota. And now The dude who booked me there, I don't think is there anymore. He was there a long time, and I worked with him for a long time. But now I can just call up the owner because I have a relationship with the owner of the club, and I can say, hey, we have this idea to do this show. So we did this recently just before the pandemic hit. My wife and I, Jana, had this idea to do like a 90s show, 90s music show with a horn section. So I would arrange a bunch of horns, and then we'd have like 4 singers that could do different styles, and a band with like bass, drums, keyboards, guitar. So we had like Devo D, and we had Rodney Ruckus on drums, and we had Johannes Tona on bass, who tours with Corey Wong, and Ryan Bynum on keyboards, who's an amazing keyboard player. Tons of amazing vocalist. Bree Turner was there. It was great. It was great. Lindora Turner, who tours with Stokely as a background vocalist. She was one of the vocalists. It was a great show, and Jana, of course, sang, and then we had Omar Abdul Karim and Lucia Sarmiento in the horn section. So it was me, Omar, and Lucia, and I had arranged all the horns. And I called him and I said, hey, we've got this idea for a show. It's called 90s Re-Up. We got this killer band. Do you want to do the show? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So we did that show in November during the Thanksgiving week. Now I'm a university professor at Michigan Tech up in the UP, so I kind of have to really plan when I do these bigger shows. And we took the week during Thanksgiving, and we drove down to Minneapolis. We rehearsed with the band a couple times, and then we put on a show, and we packed the house, right? It's like that. So we're talking 10 years apart from that first gig in maybe 2008, 2009, something like that, 2009, 2008, 12 years. This was 2019, just before 2020 that we played the show, the big sold out show at the Dakota. One of my bands, Nookie Jones, played a couple nights sold out there. And that's a band that I and the other dudes in the group really spent a lot of time building an audience that will pay for tickets, right? So number 1, enlist your friends in the industry. That's how I got my first gig, and it has grown to long-standing relationships with lots of venues that I can now call on and be like, hey, I want to put on this show. Are you guys down? Yes, let's charge $25 a ticket. Let's charge $30 a ticket and get everybody paid, right? And that's a big win. It's like if you can get to that place, that's a big win. But it took a long time. It took a long time to get there. There's a lot of grinding in between 2008 and 2022, right? And then number two is you got to record a demo, and you got to have some boots on the ground. So I kind of mentioned these a little bit in number 1. You got to have some kind of recording. Now that's easy. When I was in 2006, it was like, what do we do? Now it's easy. Everybody has a home recording setup. Everybody can take a mixing tutorial on YouTube. It's like it doesn't have to sound good. That's the crazy thing. It's like it doesn't have to sound good. The first demo we recorded with my wife's trio, it was horrible. I mean, like I said, we were standing around this mic just recording with nobody plugged in. It's like guitar was plugged into an amp, and actually he had somebody else's guitar because he had forgot his guitar when he came up from Milwaukee. He was living in Milwaukee, came up from Milwaukee, and didn't have his guitar, so it didn't even sound like Evan. This is Evan Montgomery, who's now based in LA, and a really wonderful person, wonderful guitar player. And he had another buddy of mine, this guy Andy HD, who I went to school with. He had his guitar, which was like a metal guitar, so it didn't even sound like it was supposed to sound in terms of tone, and it didn't matter. It had Jana's voice on it. It had my trumpet playing on it. It was charming, cute. The songs were good. We could play somewhat, So whoever heard it would go, "Oh yeah, that's nice." I do this series over the summer. What we did was we brought that demo to places all over Door County, Wisconsin, and the Fox Valley, and we just hand out that demo, and we ended up booking tons and tons of gigs all over the Fox Valley, Green Bay, and Door County. Door County is like this tourist area in Wisconsin, sort of like I don't know, they call it like the Cape Cod of the Midwest, right? And we passed out tons of venues up there, and so we would do like a Door County tour every summer, which was literally us just living in Door County and playing weekly gigs at tons of different venues. So we had a weekly gig twice a week. We would play at this place called Gordon Lodge Wednesdays and Sunday nights, and we got that gig. We brought the CD to the venue that had that demo, and they put it on while we were standing there, and they were like, "Yeah, this is nice. Do you guys want to play every Wednesday night?" And we were like, whoa, yes, we totally do. And we asked for $125 a person plus food and drink, and they said, sure, which seemed outrageous to us at the time because we were like in college still. And like, that was a huge amount of money for a gig. And now I know it's like, that's still pretty good bread, like especially for a Wednesday night. If you're in a regular gig to get food and drink, I mean, it's like pretty sweet. And then they added Sundays. So Wednesdays went so well, they added Sundays. And so we started doing Sundays later. We did Wednesdays and Sundays. So out of that one silly little demo that sounded horrible, we made lots of money all summer long for like 3-4 different summers. We could come back any summer we wanted to play there anytime we wanted. After we stopped, like it became hard to go back to Door County and just live there every summer because my career really started to take off in Minneapolis and Janice too. And so we wanted to be around. We wanted to be performing, and I was playing in tons of bands, and I was going on tours with Youngblood Brass Band and Nookie Jones and all these other groups. And Todd Clauser early on. And so it just didn't make sense to go back to Door County for the entire summer. But now we had built these relationships up based on boots on the ground, passing out a silly little demo. And again, like this can look different today. Like you can be sending EPKs out, which are electronic press kits, which are essentially like a website that has like some videos of the band, some press quotes. If you can gather those things, even if it's like you're reaching out to like a former professor at a university where you went to music school, or like somebody who's in the industry, and just be like, hey, could you just give me like a quote that I can use? It's like those things are really helpful. And then eventually you'll get the media quotes from local, local public radios and other kind of like local publications that deal with music. And almost all of them do. Like newspapers have column writers that deal with the scene, the music scene. And so you can get savvy with that stuff, trying to get quotes, but it'll include like a quote, video, maybe a description of the band, and some contact information and things like that. And I'm sure you can find some kind of EPK press kit builder somewhere. Maybe I'll make one myself to be able to give out at some point, but that's a really great route, and you can be emailing that to people who book shows at venues. Now, here's the problem with emailing, and this is going to bleed into point number 3, which is nobody responds to emails. I mean, that's basically true. Like, nobody responds to emails. If you're trying to book shows, it takes lots of follow-up emails. So they'll respond eventually, most of them. So the point number 3 is be persistent. Point number 3 is be persistent. Boots on the ground. I don't want to sweep boots under the ground under the rug, because boots on the ground, I don't want to sweep boots on the ground under the rug, but boots on the ground is the most important part of building your career. Hands down, not even close. Being at venues, being out at shows, seeing bands, meeting people, being on the scene. That is the number one most important part about building your career and getting people to know, getting to know venues and venue owners and booking agents and other bands. If you're in like a rock band or indie band, like Nookie Jones was more like a band that like played shows with other bands. We would have opening acts for our shows. Occasionally we would open for other people. We would do show swaps where we had a band come up from Chicago and play a show with us, and then we would go down to Chicago and play a show with them, that kind of thing. Those are great ways to connect with other bands, kind of dig into other people's fan bases and maybe build some new fans of your own. You could do all that stuff, and you could start to build those relationships by being in the scene, by boots on the ground. And that could mean like going to jam sessions. There have been great jam sessions in Minneapolis over the years. There's a great one right now, Tuesdays, at Whitey's, that my buddy Graydon Peterson leads. It's a jazz jam. Blue Nile had a great jam that was more kind of like soul, R&B, funk, jazz kind of stuff. People would come up and sing songs, do poetry. There's all kinds of different stuff that was happening there, and like amazing musicians like Roy Hargrove would show up. It was a great hang for a long time. There are other jams too that exist. I feel like there's one at the Whiskey Junction I heard about recently, but I'm not sure. That's all Minneapolis. I've been to jams in Chicago recently as well. There's one at the Hungry Brain on Tuesday nights that's led by Katie Ernst, who was a guest on this show in a previous episode. She's really awesome. So check out that episode with Katie. But yeah, boots on the ground, don't want to sweep it under the rug. Really, 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 really important. Being persistent, also really, really, really important. And especially if you're going to go the route of emailing venues, emailing booking agents, which is sometimes like you don't have a choice. You have to do that. Like when I booked my quintet in 2016, went out to New York and back, promoting the release of my album Wander, my quintet's album Wander. And we went, we did like Minneapolis, Chicago, St. Louis. Did we drive all the way from there to Pittsburgh? I don't remember. We did Pittsburgh, we did Boston, we did New York City. And so it was a great, we got to play at the Shapeshifter Lab in Brooklyn, which was a great club, really great reputation. Even though there weren't tons of people there, it looked good. It looked good to be on tour. And I'll tell you what, that gig at the Shapeshifter Lab in Brooklyn was the absolute hardest gig to book. And I had been, it's like it was 2016. I was well known in Minneapolis already. I was well known as a player, as a band leader. People knew who I was. They knew I could deliver musically and with bringing fans, selling tickets. They knew I could deliver. But New York City didn't know. And I hadn't really built anything up there yet. Pittsburgh didn't know. So it was really hard to book those gigs initially. And what I did was, number one, I leaned on people that I knew in the industry. So in this case, for the Brooklyn contact, I leaned on my fellow trumpeter and band leader and university professor, John Raymond, who's a really amazing musician. He's got a great band called Kinfolk that I just released a new album, I believe, or about to. He's got an awesome book that I probably have here in my office. You can see here, the Jazz Trumpet Routine. Let's go. I had it open on my stand. I've been working out of it. John's great. It's John there. He's a great trumpet player, musician, and human being. And he helped me out. He gave me the contact info for the venue there. And after about 50 emails, I swear to God, it was so many emails. It was like, it was to the point where I was like, and I was waiting. I had booked this tour way in advance. I was waiting 4 or 5 days before following up. 5 days, 6 days. It's like, how long do you wait? I was waiting like 5 days to do a follow-up email, and I say, hey, just want to check back in. Hey, I'm sorry to hound you. Just wanted to check back in. Hey, it's me again. I'm just looping back around on this to see if you whatever. I really appreciate you checking out the stuff if you're interested. Like, like I mentioned, my friend John, whatever. It's like I did that so many times that it started to feel like, okay, this is too much. And then I got a response, and she was like, okay, let's book the show. So it's like, what? And it's still, I still deal with that. I still deal with that with venues that I have good relationships with, venues that I have sold out shows at. It's still difficult. And that's not because of you. Like, if you're dealing with that, it's not really because of you. It's some of it is stuff you could do. It's like you could become a bigger name somehow. You could build your following on socials. You could be out on the scene more. There's things you can do, but it's not your fault if somebody's not responding to you. It's like, this is just the way it is. This is the way it is. And so it's important not to take it personally. It's important not to think that they don't like you because they didn't respond. It's like, maybe they don't know who you are. Maybe they're super busy. It's always like, maybe they're going through something that you don't know about, right? It's always the case. Even when somebody like cuts me off on the highway and flips me off, it's like, that dude's having a bad day. That dude's clearly having a bad day. It's nothing that I did, I don't think. I think I was driving pretty all right. Clearly this dude's having a bad day. So it's like that. It's like, hey, this person's getting 50 emails a day or 100 emails a day from bands who want to play at that venue. And that's pretty realistic, I bet. I don't actually know. I've never been the booking agent for a venue. I've booked series and stuff like that. And of course I've booked tours and big shows and all kinds of stuff. But they get 25, 50, 100 emails a day of bands soliciting their music, trying to get into the show. So if you can build a personal relationship with somebody who books at a venue, then, that helps because you can text them. That's what I do. I'll text. I'll just be like, hey, and then I'll still get ignored a little bit, but it's a little faster if you're like, hey, man, I sent you an email. Just wanted to, see if you had a chance to check it out. No worries. Hope you're doing great. Yada, yada. It's like I always try to be kind. Being kind is really be kind, but be persistent. I think is how I had this written down when I was thinking this through to do this podcast episode. Be kind, but be persistent, right? Or be persistent and kind. I think kindness goes such a long way in life, just in general, for building your career and trying to lift other people up. It's like I've always kind of been about that. I always want to see other people succeed, other people on my instrument. I have a competitive edge too, of course. Like I grew up playing sports, and I have a little bit of that. Like, I'm going to do this, but only in a healthy way, in a way that's like, wow, that's really cool what you're doing. I want to see if I can do that, or I want to see if I can one up that, or I want to see if I can, you know what I mean? And that's maybe also a trumpet player mentality. It's like anybody that knows trumpet players knows that we've got large egos. But it's sort of like you can't play the trumpet well without having a large ego. It's really like you have to believe that you're the best in the world to play it well. And that's probably the case for any instrument. What I always tell my students is keep your ego at the door when you go to the practice room. But when you go up on stage, you have to project confidence. You have to. That'll make you feel more confident. It'll make you play better. Pretend, act, do what you have to do to feel comfortable. And as is the case with anything, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And that's if you're pretending, if you're just performing on stage a lot, you just get more comfortable doing it. Be persistent. You're going to have to send follow-up email after follow-up email after follow-up email after follow-up email. You can call, leave messages. One of the guys that I book with, just his mailbox is always full, so you just call, and if you catch him, you catch him. That's kind of old school. It's one of the more old school people that I book shows with. But generally, I think it's better, if you can, it's better to be boots on the ground. And then at some point, it's like, this is the least fun stuff that musicians do, right? Like, nobody wants to book gigs all the time. Like, nobody wants to be working on that, except that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? It's a means of being able to express yourself on stage, being able to play shows, right? That's the end result of all this work that is non-musical. That's really important for being able to play music. This is all the stuff. This is why I do this podcast. It's like I want you guys to know like what I've dealt with and what I've learned along the way. There's a lot of important lessons in there. But to recap, number 1, enlist your friends who are in the industry, who have connections. Maybe there's somebody that you've met because you've been on the scene, going to shows, and ask them who to contact at certain venues or what would be a good venue for what I'm doing, and see what they say. Number 2, boots on the ground, record a demo, get it in front of people, either through an EPK or through literally handing someone a physical product. Okay? And CDs, it's tough now because not everybody has a CD player. But if you have a CD, it's still good. Like, I still give them out. And occasionally somebody will spin it or they'll go find it on Spotify. All right? And then number 3, be persistent. Be persistent and don't take it personally. And be kind. Be kind, be persistent, and don't take it personally. All right? It's a slow build. It's always going to be a slow build. It's always going to be a grind. Okay? Even if you've got thousands of followers on Instagram, that does not mean that you're going to have a sold-out show. It's not what it means. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to book a gig. It's not what it means. It's a different thing. You can translate, and there are some people that are really good at translating those likes and follows to ticket sales, in-person engagement, merch sales, things like that. And that's that sweet sauce that we're looking to uncover. Like how do we translate this stuff we're doing online to in person, or vice versa? Depending on what you're into. You know, I mentioned Katie Ernst, who runs a jam session in Chicago. She's not active on social media hardly at all. But she has a great community in Chicago where she's completely sustained, right? Which is pretty cool. So that's it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening. Once again, if you are watching on YouTube, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and then also give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. A 5-star rating and a review would be super awesome and helpful. We're trying to grow this thing, and we really appreciate you checking it out. All right. Good luck to you. Send me an email with any questions, right? Send me a message. If you know me on socials, find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook, whatever, and send me a message and be like, yo, how do I do this? And I'll do my best to help. All right. That's it. Peace.